Welcome back to Journey of Self-Awareness, where we've been discussing paradoxes one encounters on a spiritual journey. One is the paradox between being and non-being, or between nihilism and eternalism, or existence and non-existence. And another has to do with the two truths, what I call, on the one hand, mundane or relative reality, and on the other hand, you have absolute or ultimate reality. There's definitely some potential conceptual minefields that one can walk into and never get out of if you're not careful. So, to recap a bit where we left off last week, we were talking about conventional reality and absolute reality, and I said that conventional or mundane reality refers to our everyday experiences in the world. We perceive a solid, independent reality around us, which is a perfectly valid way to interact with the world on a daily basis. Well, on the other hand, ultimate reality is that things lack inherent existence, that phenomenon are empty of inherent existence. They arise dependently on causes and conditions, and they're impermanent. They're constantly changing, coming and going. The middle way is an effort to avoid the extremes of one perspective or the other. It acknowledges both conventional reality, the world we experience, and the emptiness of inherent existence. Now, this brings us to the Dzogchen teachings, which take this all a step further by pointing directly to the pure, non-dual nature of mind itself. Dzogchen suggests that even our seemingly solid perceptions of the external world are ultimately illusory. The metaphor they use is like looking at reflections in a mirror. They're apparently real, but they're only reflections. They don't really exist. So, another metaphor that's used is the dreamlike nature of reality. When you're having a dream while sleeping, it can seem perfectly real to you, but when you wake up, you realize that it was only a dream, that it really didn't exist. So Dzogchen would say that our perceptions of the external world are purely illusory. And from this perspective, then, all dualistic perceptions of external reality are an illusion, like a dream or a mirage. Now, this perspective doesn't necessarily negate the conventional reality of interdependent appearances of, or the middle way, the notions of everything arising as a result of dependent origination, and instead, it's pointing to a deeper reality beyond our everyday experiences. The illusion-like nature of phenomenon is simply the relative truth, while their empty yet luminous essence is the ultimate truth. In essence, these views are complementary rather than contradictory. We can function in the everyday world of conventional reality while recognizing the deeper reality or ultimate truth that's discussed in the Middle Way. So, Dzogchen is pushing us to question even our perceptions of external reality. Dzogchen is emphasizing direct experiential realization of the nature of mind. Dzogchen practitioners view all phenomenon as manifestations of this pure awareness, which they call Rigpa, which is beyond dualistic concepts of being and non-being. This is a non-dual teaching. The illusory nature of reality, then, in Dzogchen, is a way to help us realize the true nature of our minds, which is inherently pure and luminous and primordially pure, unblemished. Buddhists talk, of course, a lot about ignorance being the source of our suffering, but what is it? This concept of ignorance actually brings us full circle. Ignorance is buying into our conditioning and believing the taken for granted socially constructed narratives that shape our perceptions of reality. Growing up, our minds become profoundly addicted to dualism, the idea that external objects exist outside of ourselves. We tend to think that things exist completely independent of our thoughts about them. When we dualistically believe in the existence of a separate reality, that belief itself becomes the basis for our attachments, our strivings, and our aversions, or our fears. It's the very basis, then, of our suffering. However, when one realizes the truth, the mind becomes silent and empty. The interpretive overlay of discursive or conceptual thoughts, that vanishes, and we experience the realization of emptiness as mental peace and silence and freedom. This realization of emptiness removes our perceptual distortions, so we no longer see the world through the filter of our conceptualizations. Therefore, the purpose of grasping this concept of emptiness and understanding the nature of ignorance, it's not simply to acquire philosophical knowledge. Instead, we meditate on emptiness to attain a liberated state of mind that's free from the clinging and the attachments and the worry and the emotional baggage that is caught up in and enmeshed in the concept of a false self, the illusory nature of the false self. The point, then, of Madhyamaka or middle way reasoning isn't to establish a universal truth. This is a pragmatic project that's aimed at ending our delusions and our suffering. The middle way seeks to clarify the limits of our conceptual minds. It holds that ultimately reality cannot be depicted by concepts or grasped by the rational mind or harnessed by logic, because absolute reality is completely beyond concepts. It's beyond language. It's a peace that's beyond all conceptual understanding, as Jesus said. So there is only one reality which appears non-conceptually, or as Nagarjuna said, that nirvana is the sole reality. The Buddhist master Atisha described the ultimate when he wrote, "Here there is no seeing and no seer, no beginning and no end, just peace. It's non-conceptual and non-referential. It's inexpressible, unobservable, unchanging, and unconditioned. And that's a paradox." Dzogchen holds that all appearances and awareness itself are non-dual. In other words, all appearances that arise in our field of awareness are nothing other than that field of awareness, than that consciousness. They are one and the same. Our consciousness, our awareness, is that which gives birth to all these things that are constantly arising. There is no room for separation or duality between us and them, object and subject, the perceived and the perceiver. These distinctions vanish in a non-dual perspective. We can view these perspectives then as stages in deepening one's understanding. A practitioner might start with the middle way and progress to philosophical understandings of emptiness and Madhyamaka, or the middle way, and ultimately experience the direct realization of Dzogchen. The key here is understanding that these teachings are not mutually exclusive. Rather, they're addressing different layers of understanding and experience. The Middle Way addresses practical ethics and mindfulness. Madhyamaka provides a profound philosophical framework. Dzogchen offers a direct experiential path. Dzogchen would say that, and some in Neo-Advaita will say that there is no path, there is no seeker, that because the false self doesn't really exist, that we don't need to engage in spiritual practices. But I think most contemporary Buddhists, particularly in the Tibetan tradition, would say that while this is ultimately true, it doesn't help a person who's stuck in the concepts and the conditioning of the egoic self, that spiritual practices do indeed have a place to make the mind pliant, to help us overcome our conditioning, to help us open our minds and loosen the grip of the egoic self so that we do indeed make progress on a spiritual path. As Rick Archer at Buddha at the Gas Pump is fond of saying, spiritual awakening may be an accident, but spiritual practices makes one accident prone. That's the purpose of spiritual practices, of cultivating virtues, of living an ethical life, of adopting a beginner's mind and maintaining an open field of awareness, of engaging in spiritual practices, which will be the topic of a whole nother series of videos that are coming up very shortly now. So don't forget to subscribe so you make sure to catch the future videos that are coming. Tell your friends about us so we help the channel to grow. And thank you again for joining me today on Journey of Self-Awareness. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.